November, one Aaron Rodgers said that if the NFL really cared about player safety, then perhaps they should consider ponying up and changing all fields to grass surfaces. Well, Aaron Rodgers is going to play 14 games this year on turf. And when you are approaching 40, that is much tougher on your knees, on your hips. And as we saw last year, it can be really difficult. We saw Von Miller go down, saw Rashawn Gary go down. Quite a few players last year really raised concerns. It was very, very prominent. And I know that there was new turf laid at MetLife, or what did you say, Brian? He's calling it Jet Life. Even still, it's still turf. It's not grass. I think that is just something to keep an eye on.
Welcome to the Irish NFL show, week one. It's Jock Solauer, as you might say, Oscuelga, and that, of course, was Cork's own Nostradamus, Colin Cronin, predicting what would happen. We've been pushing out the clip on social today, although I've one slight bone to pick with it, Colin. He didn't play 14 games on turf. The poor man only managed to play 4 snaps in the end, but you quite rightly called the massive risk, unfortunately, and not to make light of it, it's a terrible injury for Aaron Rodgers and what it does for the Jets season. Ruptured Achilles or torn Achilles. That's pretty much a season-ending injury, although there has been some kind of optimistic talk later on in the day, or as the day progresses, from people wishing that Aaron Rodgers are saying, wish casting that he could get back before the end of the season, but that really seems very unlikely, given the extent. I mean, the video is gruesome watching. When you see the close-up, you can literally see, and apologies to anyone watching us live now on YouTube who maybe have a sensitive disposition or listening to us back to a recording later, you can see the calf ripple, as I think it's been dubbed now, as the Achilles snaps, and that is a terrible way to end Aaron Rodgers' first game after 4 snaps for the Jets, and what it does for the Jets season. I guess we will get into now. Colin, we'll have to give you the first word, since you were the one who called out the risk, and unfortunately you go all in on a 39-year-old quarterback, oldest player in the league. There's always that heightened risk of injury, but nobody would have ever predicted it would happen this way. It's so unfortunate, particularly for the Jets, because this is how the Brett Favre experience ended as well. Albeit at least that they got rolling under Favre before his injury kind of derailed their season. They also saw it happen in week 1 with Vinny Testaverde back in the day, same injury. Like, that's the kind of thing that really does reinforce the idea that your team is cursed.
Yeah, and look, I hate the fact that Aaron Rodgers is down for the season, and the reality is he's approaching 40. It's an Achilles injury. Will we ever see him in the league again? People can wish cast all they want, but life is not a Disney movie. And I didn't have to be Nostradamus to predict this, because everyone's been talking about the issue of turf for ages, and kind of you point out like how much they spent in draft capital and in the contract to bring him across, but then the owners do so little to protect their players, right? We give players so much grief for making a business decision. Owners make business decisions all the time. And this has been a really bad day for owners in the league, obviously, with the Jim Trotter news around his lawsuit. And we'll have to see how that plays out. But players have been calling to play on grass fields for years now. And how many more injuries is it going to take? This is a multi-billion-dollar league, right? Where we saw chains break again on Sunday, and now we have lost one of the all-time greats, and what would have been an intriguing storyline to see how it was going to play out over the course of the season. I hope this might be the catalyst for change. I don't know if it will be, but you have to feel for Rodgers. You have to feel for Jets fans, the excitement that was palpable there. And as I've said on the show before, and as Ned Flanders is fond of saying, it puts them in a dilly of a pickle.
It certainly does, Brian. MetLife, no longer Jet Life after that. It certainly seems that's a real land in every sense for the crosstown rivals. Obviously, we'll get to the Giants as we go to their particular season opener. But
do we have to? Yeah.
Eventually, we'll get there. We'll get to the Bears too. We weren't exactly living it up either, but. The occasion, with everything that went with it, it's the anniversary of 9/11. Rodgers runs out with the American flag. There's the flyover. There's everything that goes with that somber occasion in the US, and everything was set up for a grandstand game against the Bills. Like, it couldn't really have been a better season one opener. It's a desperate way for it to get started. However, the way the game unfolded afterwards, I think, told us a lot about the quality of what's in that Jets locker room and what's in the coaching positions led by Robert Saleh. I thought they responded incredibly well in adversity at all levels.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I thought that was a game which the Bills, for large parts, looked like they were comfortable in. But again, it kind of, like we kind of discussed during our off-season stuff around if Robert Saleh would be under pressure because of the nature of the team and panel in which to put together this year. But even after the game, you see some of the interviews and some of the players were quite outspoken, and obviously there's been a lot of beeps on some of the coverage which we saw today. But again, it just shows how much they want to play for this particular head coach. And in a way, the story is kind of lost in a sense, but it was a unique story in the end that the winning touchdown is from a guy who was an undrafted selection, wasn't selected properly in the draft, nearly didn't make the panel if it wasn't for the players getting injured, and he goes and scores the winning touchdown. It's a great story in that sense. But we put out a social tweet today saying, how do Jets fans feel today? Is it a conflict of interest in the sense of you lose your quarterback, yet you find a way to beat the Bills? It's a difficult one today. I just want to jump back to just earlier on there around no one's a winner in this instance. And I mean that from across the league in terms of fans, because the storyline of Aaron Rodgers playing for the Jets this year would have been great. We would have loved it. We would have spoken about it all throughout the course of the season, whether they would have made the playoffs, if they would have won the game last night and so on. The Packers aren't going to be a winner now. They don't get that first round pick that they thought they would inevitably with 65% of the snap of the play this year, resulting in the first round pick. Now it's a second. They don't win, and the Jets fans ultimately don't win, and they are genuinely believing what you said earlier, that they are cursed today. And just one final point on the game: the Bills. Josh Allen, for me, just doesn't seem like the Josh Allen of old. Colin rightly called out today. He plays with his head on fire at times, and I got that sense last night. He just didn't seem to be in control of the game, even when it looked like they were comfortable. He throws 3 interceptions. Some suggestions today that he should have been taken out of the game and looked at for a potential concussion, which was waved off and wasn't really looked at. And you'd ask, was he really 100% there last night? Because even the fumble, something just seems a bit off. I don't know if it's again, we keep referring back to Brian Dable not being there anymore and things have changed for him. I'm not necessarily saying that's the reason. It just doesn't seem like the Josh Allen that we saw a couple of years ago. Maybe I'm too early in the season and I'm being a bit judgmental, but something strikes me as a bit odd with the Bills at the moment, because that was a game they should have really won.
Colin, before we move on, and there's so many other things to talk about from what was a really exciting week one, even as week ones go, and we're all kind of jumping into week one overreaction mode because there's so much that you can overreact to, react and overreact to. One of the only, and I use the word advisedly, winners in all this is Zach Wilson, who's going to be the guy now who has to carry the franchises, and who, to be fair to him, and at times he looks like how you feel when you wake up from one of those dreams where it's your leaving cert again. Last season, he looked like a panicked child on the field at times. But he bounced back from adversity, as Saleh said after the game. He didn't blow up after he had the interception. And ultimately, he led the Jets to win that game under the most incredible pressure he must ever have faced in his life.
Well, he can thank Garrett Wilson, and I got plenty wrong in week one, but Garrett Wilson basically intercepting the pass that he threw straight to the Buffalo Bills cornerback. Talk about bailing out Zach Wilson. When you watch, I mean, the only thing that might make watching Zach Wilson play, if he does play the remainder of the games, and you hear that they're already making phone calls, so let's see. But if we can watch Peyton Manning watch Zach Wilson, because if people out there haven't seen the Manning cast of Peyton and Eli watching it, and Peyton losing his mind at how Zach Wilson approaches playing, that was entertainment gold. I don't think Zach Wilson will be the long-term answer there. They have too much invested in this. They're all in. I think they'll look to bring somebody in, and they got it done, but I would say they got it done because Josh Allen, who I tip for MVP, lost his mind, and I would agree with Brian. He looked terrible last night. Now, this could be that he has a Trevor Lawrence-like moment. He goes away, he reassesses, because he has been playing. And I heard a great phrase on the Ringer podcast during the week, which was he plays like it's the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl. He has the ball to win and he's down by 6 points. He forces everything, and he was just chucking it down last night. Like some of the plays, if you saw, Dalton Kincaid was open underneath.
Chris Sims and Mike Florio
it.
call it the 14-point play. That he's always after the 14-point play. That
yeah, it's a good way of putting it, that he has got to sort that out.
Yeah, at the same time though, you can't coach the Josh Allen out of Josh Allen. Like, he's Kevin Costner in Tin Cup. Josh Allen doesn't lay it up. He takes the big stick out of the bag and he tries to carry the water every time, and that's what makes him so incredibly watchable. I wonder though, Brian, to your point, like, he got rocked when he threw one of those interceptions. He really took a bad hit, and you can look for a moment with the TV cameras in your face when they catch that reaction shot, but he looked dazed as he got back up. You would think in other sports that would have been some kind of HIA or some kind of moment to reflect and make sure he was okay. It's worrying when something like that happens. Let's hope there was nothing to it, but it definitely seemed to affect his performance as the game went on. Speaking of performance, like, obviously there's lots of great ones to look at from the weekend. Colin, you mentioned Garrett Wilson there. For anyone who hasn't had a chance to look at that catch in detail, like, that should be, in my opinion, where you start looking at your highlights of the week. I mean, to your point, Colin, it's thrown to the cornerback. It looks like Wilson somehow manages, because he has his thumb pointed down towards his hand. His hand has to be in an unnatural position to get it away from the cornerback. It almost looks like he stops the ball in midair, and then as he falls to the ground, he has to juggle it because of the awkward position he lands in, and somehow manages to reel it in. It's a combination of David Tyree and Julian Edelman and whatever other crazy catch you've ever seen in your life, all wrapped into one highlight reel moment. But so many other highlights from the weekend, guys. Brian, Tua was unbelievable for the Dolphins against the Chargers. We said this game would be a shootout, and it absolutely lived up to expectation.
466 yards, 3 touchdowns. It's just unbelievable. I made a mistake of picking the Chargers. Bonehead. Like, what was I thinking? I said the game would play out exactly as it did, as it transpired, and it would come down to a field goal. But then the Chargers found ways to mess things up. 146 left, two timeouts. Kellen Moore's the new offense coordinator. He's the golden child now. He's the answer. This is bread and butter for him, isn't it? To find a way of putting this team. We did a live show last January before you joined, Connor, in which I questioned if Kellen Moore should be still in Dallas, and then the following day he was removed from the position. But everybody's been lighting him up just this off season, and thought that was a chance for him in that particular game to make a point. It didn't play out, but the Chargers did what the Chargers do. They play beautiful games, very exciting to watch. Justin Herbert looks fantastic, but still find ways to show it away. Maybe I've been a bit disrespectful on the Dolphins, because the Dolphins looked like they were gone and they found a way to come back, but do it. This was the two we saw at the start of last season. I hope it continues, because he's great to watch. It's great to see Tyreek Hill. And Brandon Staley decides that he's just going to go zone and marking on Tyreek Hill for large parts of the game and leaving safeties exposed. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But great game, and Tua is off to a great start. And it'll be interesting to see if the Patriots can slow them up on Sunday Night Football, because I know we'll come to, but they slowed up Jalen Hurts to a large extent of that game. So Belichick will probably be already scheming against this attacking-minded Dolphins offense.
Yeah, Tua was amazing, as you say, Brian. But Colin, like, there's so much more to that Dolphins offense as well. Like, it wasn't just hit Tyreek and Jalen Waddle and watch them do their stuff. Like, Berrios got involved. There was the tight ends, Smythe, Craycraft is another guy who got into the mix. Like, Tua knows how to use all the weapons at his disposal, including Mostert, who was also a great option for them during the game. It's a compelling mix, and it makes for compelling viewing when it works.
Yeah, look, I thought this was the two best offensive sides of the weekend going up against one another. I think if the Chargers had played anyone else, they probably would have won, but they ran into an absolute buzzsaw. And this is where week one is interesting, right? Because guys get to scheme for, the whole of the summer, right? You know what you're going to face. And Bill Belichick came up with a plan to really slow the Eagles, and Mike McDaniel got to spend all over the summer scheming up what he was going to do. And they were brilliant. They came at the Chargers from all angles, and it was so difficult. And I don't know like in that game on Sunday, could any defense have lived with them what they were doing? And it'll be interesting to see, how it goes. I hope Tua can stay healthy, but I suppose something to note is, like, I look back to week 1 of 2022, and obviously the Bills stormed out of the block last year. The Commanders beat the Jags last year. The Buccaneers absolutely dominated the Cowboys. Right, the Cowboys scored 3 points in that game. The Bucs would go on, and Leonard Fournette was incredible. Well, Lenny would go on to have a disastrous season. The Bucs only won 7 more games, and the Cowboys won 12. So week 1 can be a bit of a false dawn at times. But if this Dolphins team can continue the way they started, nobody is going to look forward to playing them.
And Brian, week 1 last year, the Bears beat the 49ers. They did not even get close to beating the Packers this year. And I suppose one of the performances we have to talk about on the weekend, and something which I feared from us at the offseason, it turns out Jordan Love is actually pretty good. Or is he?
He was good and I tell you, he managed the game quite well. I don't think he was off the charts good the way some of the Packers fans have been suggesting since Sunday. And I can understand, when you wait 7 months and, inevitably, let's be fair, we knew from a large part of the offseason Aaron Rodgers was moving on and Jordan Love was your guy. But I didn't he missed some players at times that were wide open, but it was a good start from, let's be fair. They come into, I think they ran into a nice opening game, with all due respect to Bears fans, that didn't play out in the manner that a lot of people felt. They thought it would be a really close game, which is kind of consistent with the odds were for the game. Like we spoke about it on our live show, the Bears were slight favourites in a point, but for me, the question mark coming out of this game is Justin Fields. And I know it's very early in the season, and Colum's rightly called out the narratives are already out there. We saw last year compared to who was better at the end, but I didn't see Justin Fields on Sunday any way improved to what we saw last year. I thought he was clumsy with the ball at times, in terms of the fumble, the interception to Walker, which was returned for the pick 6. And again, it's back to the offensive line again for the Bears, unfortunately. There was a play in the first half which kind of summed up the Bears. I think we spoke about it briefly yesterday. The entire offensive line got called for a false start. I mean, that's a rarity in the NFL. They were so inconsistent. I know you rightly called it out in the lead up to players were injured and it looked like it was all patched back together again. Just didn't seem to be any way improved from where we were last year. And the question mark's going to be there for Justin Fields all year long. And the scheming on the offense, and you can probably come to better than I can, because you would have scrutinized a little bit more, Connor, but for DJ Moore to only to be looked at in terms of two plays in which he went off for some good yards, you think that's working, let's continue with that. And then they got away from it very early on, which was strange in my opinion.
Well, look, as Colin was saying, you have the whole offseason to scheme for one game. You had both Luke Getsy and Alan Williams. I thought, having a really bad day at the office week 1. Alan Williams didn't scheme up a single blitz against Jordan Love, a quarterback starting only his second game. You got to put guys in the young rookie's face. Make him beat you. He did beat the Bears, but he certainly wasn't put under any great duress while he was doing so. So to your point, Brian, it's kind of hard to gauge how good Jordan Love actually is. From a Bears perspective, then the offensive game plan was very strange. No real evolution from what we saw last year, and maybe that was because the offensive line, unfortunately, not only with any of the new faces, doesn't seem to have taken any steps forward, but one of the guys who actually was a decent performer last year, Braxton Jones, alarmingly, and I know it's on the basis of an absurdly small sample size and only one game, but seemed to have taken a bit of a step back. He had a really, really rough outing, and you had all these kind of tight end screens which didn't quite come off. As you say, DJ Moore only targeted twice. He 50 yards on those 2 completions. Surely you got to try and work the ball down to him. And you're putting Justin Fields in places where he's running for his life, he's scrambling, he's at times again making bad decisions. But again, how much of that is down to the fact that he's just not getting any type of consistent protection, or whether it's just that he's developed bad habits and he hasn't been able to progress. We'll see as the season goes on. But for Bears fans, it's plus ça change, plus qu'il reste la même chose. So it's a big concern heading into week 2. Although, as you said, Colin, when we were talking about how we can overreact to week 1, Bears looked like they were sitting pretty this time last year. The 49ers were miserable leaving a very wet Soldier Field, and one of those 2 teams ended up in the NFC Championship game, and the other one ended up with the number 1 overall pick in the draft. Colin, speaking of teams that may be heading to the NFC Championship game, if you're to believe the week 1 hype, Dallas Cowboys, and that Cowboys defense looking mean.
Yeah, I mean, just a nightmare for Brian. They start. They were perfect. I mean, Dallas's offense didn't even really have to get going. This is the thing, and again, I suppose it comes down to the Cowboys' defense feels a little bit like the Dolphins' offense because they are coming up with new ways to just get at you, and Parsons was everywhere. But they had like they I think it was the 7 players had a tackle for a loss, and I mean, for the Giants, I mean, it was one of those ones where I imagine, like, if they could have avoided going out for the second half, they would have preferred that. Just nothing went right from the off. You sometimes have those nights. They'll look to rebound in week 2, but this is what the Cowboys can do. And again, it will be interesting to see how other teams look to respond to that, because there's always a response to the response. But you would have to say, for Dan Quinn, kudos to him. This is a guy who obviously was a fantastic defensive coordinator up in Seattle, became a head coach, had his moments, obviously, but ultimately as a defense coordinator, his teams are terrifying. And if you are a team with any sort of O-line issues and you're going to face the Cowboys, good luck.
Yeah, as you said, Micah Parsons is just a game wrecker. The box score never really quite does justice to what you have to watch this guy closely and watch him for a full game just to see what he does. I mean, he's just walking through double teams, wrecking them, moving 2 guys back and allowing other people to waltz in to get sacks and to get pressure on the quarterback. It's just intimidating to watch, Brian. And unfortunately, you were on the other end of it. And it put Daniel Jones in a circumstance where he looked not like last year's Daniel Jones, but like the previous year's version. And you'd hope that doesn't pan out for the season ahead for them or for him.
It looked like the previous year's offensive line. Like, it was just the offensive line, which for large parts of last season played really well, was back to kind of what we saw pre-Brian Dable. And Micah Parsons, I mean, his speed is just surreal. Like, the speed off the blocks, the initial block and the speed thereafter, the stunts. I mean, he was pulling out all the bits and pieces on Sunday night. It's a joy to watch, even if as much as you don't want to, see it happen to your own player and your own team. Sometimes you just have to recognize it's just fantastic. Like, we discussed the Cowboys last week, and Colin suggested that there's a number of people suggesting they could go to the Super Bowl primarily on this defense. And I know, okay, it's only sample size 1 week, but they're going to go up against the Jets on Sunday with Zach Wilson. I mean, they'll be licking their lips at this situation, because the Jets' offensive line is also a concern. That's probably the key thing. Even with Aaron Rodgers there, that was the key thing coming into the season for them. And they're going to have another opportunity by the cherry to go after the quarterback on Sunday, which will be vulnerable, because Daniel Jones was certainly left in very vulnerable positions on Sunday. I think for the Giants, it's one of those situations, like, they're not going to, overly concern themselves. The performance was bad. Things spiraled very quickly. It's kind of one of those games that whilst the Cowboys were good, they self-imploded very quickly. I mean, you have really efficient drive to start the game, only for your field goal to be blocked, your kicker to get injured, it gets returned for a pick 6. Your next drive, it's an interception return for another touchdown. The game is over for the end of the first quarter, but you could argue they've got a nice rebound on Sunday when they play Arizona. The kind of game they could get back on track, albeit on the road. So be interested to see what reaction, if anybody can get a reaction now with these players. I genuinely believe it is Dable. So he looked truly disappointed with his own performance. He called out some of the coaching on the sideline in terms of the miscommunication leading to timeouts. He said from the top to the bottom, everything was all wrong on Sunday. So it'll be interesting to see how they react to that come Sunday.
Colin, we have, as we said, witnessed quite a lot of surprise results, a lot of upsets over that week 1, albeit that, this is what happens when you put a lot of divisional games in for decision in week 1, right? You get some of those quirky results, like the Browns obviously just seem to own the Bengals, and it seems to go, form book really does seem to go out the window in that matchup. One of the more surprising results, though, and maybe a performance that presages the return of a player who had an injury-disrupted season last year. Matthew Stafford looked back. The Rams looked a lot better than advertised with all those young guys. We hark back to that famous quote about "you'll win nothing with kids," the old Alan Hansen quote. Are the Rams about to disprove that in an NFL sense?
Well, Brian had pointed out in the preview show that these are two teams where it doesn't matter what the form is going into, it doesn't matter where they're at, they always play each other close. In the end, it wasn't close, but it was an upset. And my goodness, did I get the Seahawks wrong? And losing both tackles really exposed the interior, and Aaron Donald had himself a field day. The Rams have two wide receivers go over 100 yards. They've three of their wide receivers went into the double digits in terms of their average receiving. And Stafford was fantastic. Like, his ball placement was absolutely incredible. He doesn't end up with any touchdowns because they all end up rushing him in. But it's an interesting one, in terms of the scheme. We've talked about that, summer, and the fact that Sean McVay, who we know is a great offensive mind, but the worry on my end was it burnout? But he got a young core there. It's a little bit, similar to the Packers in certain respect. Like, the Packers made a conscious decision that they weren't going to bring in any vets, to compete and take snaps away from their young players. McVay is able to, I suppose, craft that. Now, we will see. One of the things that, was interesting around, say, Jordan Love was he wasn't put under any pressure by the Bears. So how does that do week 2? In terms of it felt like for the Seahawks, everything nothing went right. They had the injuries, the passing game was off, Metcalf got frustrated at times. So it will be interesting to see how they do. But certainly, the Rams, if you show up, and maybe there was a bit of arrogance on the Seahawks part, I don't know, but Sean McVay knows how to coach an offense, and on offense, certainly they could well be feisty.
That game also, of course, gave us what I think would probably stand up as the mic'd up moment of the week, when Aaron Donald came tearing in on top of Geno Smith. For anyone who hasn't seen it, you can find it fairly easily on X or on YouTube. And Geno Smith just blurts out, "Oh my God!" as Aaron Donald closes in on him, which I think accurately captures both the fear that you would have if you saw 99 bearing down on you, and also what was coming at the Seahawks as the result got away from them. It was an interesting game, that one, though, Brian, in that, you start looking back at the Rams then and going, well, they still have Matthew Stafford. They still have Cooper Kupp, albeit he was out for week 1 and maybe a while recovering from that injury. They still have Higbee. They still have Donald. And they've got this young core of players who are probably going to be very volatile, as is the case when you bring in that many new faces, but who could be a little bit spicy if they get a bit of momentum going.
Yeah, I think they'll be an entertaining team to watch throughout the course of the season. They're playing the 49ers this weekend. It'll be interesting to see if they can live. I know we're going to come to the Niners shortly in terms of what they did on the Steelers, but it'll be interesting to see in an NFC West. Like, it's just a kind of a measuring stick type of game for them this weekend. How quickly they've moved on from where they were last year. It'll be interesting to see how they react to playing Sunday. I just like to call out Matthew Stafford, because for last year people were saying he was washed up, and having watched him on Sunday in that game, he looked like the Matthew Stafford we saw a couple of years ago playing in the Super Bowl. Obviously, he was gone for large parts of last season with the injury. I mean, is that really more reflection of him now in terms of the player that he is, and what we saw last year early on in the season wasn't really the player, which, because of the nature of the injury he was carrying. And I remember calling him out at the start of last season, there could be more to that particular injury than they're letting on. There could be more to the Cooper Kupp injury than they're letting on. And as it transpired, Matthew Stafford went early on in the season, wasn't to come back. Suggestions of being traded in the offseason, people saying no, he's not the player he was. I think on Sunday we saw the Matthew Stafford, which was the player in which the Rams looked to get as part of that trade, and in the end brought the Super Bowl for the team and the franchise.
Colin, Brian mentioned the 49ers there, and while that certainly wasn't an upset victory with due respect to Steelers fans, I don't think we necessarily foresaw the margin of victory there for the Niners, who came into this with a point to prove. Brock Purdy in particular came in with a point to prove, and a combination of that fearsome 49ers defense and all the weapons they have on offense, capably coordinated by Purdy and his return from surgery, was more than enough to account for the Steelers, who, as Mike Tomlin said, got kicked in the teeth.
Yeah, and it was more than, I suppose, just kind of kicked in the teeth, because you, they, the Steelers were on offense were just horrifically bad. And obviously the 49ers have a supremely talented defense, but there was also, Kenny Pickett just looked completely out of sorts. And obviously there was an awful lot of hype around him in the preseason, and he looked really good. Well, preseason and regular season, very different sort of affair. And look, the 49ers they had this one put to bed, by the end of the first quarter, and they kind of basically hit cruise control and just saw them off. There may be some concerns, around the fact that TJ Watt was able to get into the backfield, but ultimately you felt that if the 49ers really needed to, they could have taken it up another couple of gears. I would worry about the Steelers and Matt Canada and what that's going to look like. And, they will improve from this. But there have been a couple of moments now over the past 3 seasons. I've been a big vocal advocate of Mike Tomlin on this show, but there have been a couple of enormous losses over the past 3 seasons that would concern you slightly. But Brock Purdy showed, he's there. There were moments that, he wasn't perfect, but there were other moments where he's absolutely fantastic. And in a Kyle Shanahan system, now they need to keep Christian McCaffrey fit, but he is the absolute difference maker for them.
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier, Brian, as to whether Brock Purdy is just a slightly edgier Jimmy Garoppolo. Like he will roll the dice a little bit more, and so far it's been working for him.
Yeah, on the instant reaction show on Sunday night with our American friend who comes on the show sparingly from time to time, he kind of referenced Jimmy Garoppolo and the throw motion. They look so similar in the way they play. And Shanahan likes Purdy because the difference being when he's in the pocket and he's pressured, Purdy doesn't react in the same way in which Jimmy G does, and which we saw kind of in the game in Denver, in which he drew that needless interception in the red zone when he's under pressure. But Brock Purdy doesn't seem to struggle under pressure. I know Collins referred to it a number of times, which what got to them, but you're going to see that in the course of the games. He looked very composed, very measured. It looked like a guy that was really fully understanding of what was expected of him and the offense. But as Colin rightly called it, when you got McCaffrey and Brandon Ayuk seems to be coming into his own, they've got so many different weapons on this team. But it was for an opening day game in which a guy who finished the season with a serious injury, he looked very, very composed. Just on the Steelers, just want to make a quick point. Like Kenny Pickett for me needs to work when he has a measured run game. They're competitive, they're in games, and it's tight, and they can play the type of offense they want. When they get behind, and I'm talking about getting behind by double digits, and they have to start throwing to get back in the games. That to me kind of where they kind of spiral and go out of control. Saw it in some games last year as well. He's not fit for me to be that type of quarterback when they're trying to come back in games. They need to be playing with a lead, playing tight games, run offenses, primarily with the run, and then obviously complement that with the passing game. Where they have to drop back and continuously throw, it's not going to work for me. I think that's inevitably where the problems are going to be for the Steelers this year.
All right, let's talk rookies and some really great performances over week one. We glossed over, as we discussed the Rams game, the performance of Puka Nacua, 119 yards, filling in for Cooper Kupp, 5th round pick in the draft from BYU. Great performance from him. Colin, quarterback wise though, was there anybody that stood out for you? None of the rookies, if memory serves me, actually won in week one, preserving that lamentable record of rookie quarterbacks actually winning their first start. But who stood out for you among those who did stand under center for the first time?
I suppose there were a couple of things that stood out to me, Connor, in relation to this. I thought you saw, growing pains for all of them, but I will say that you saw moments from Richardson that I thought were excellent. He needs to learn that he needs to protect himself, and Trevor Lawrence talked about that after the game, and that hopefully will come with experience. But you saw the ability to run, you saw the ability to make big throws. When it came to Stroud, you saw him grow into the game. He's struggled. He doesn't exactly have the receiving core that maybe some other teams have. But he was precise. He was prepared to throw it to the middle of the field. The concern from week one, right? And there's a long way to go, but the concern is for me is with Bryce Young, because Bryce Young threw 2 identical interceptions, and it was like he just didn't see Jesse Bates. Now, Jesse Bates is a very good player. There's a reason that they paid him that money, but what made Bryce Young so great in college, we didn't see any of that on Sunday. Whereas you saw flashes from Stroud, you saw flashes from Richardson. It's game one. There were lots and lots of issues for the Panthers, but that's, one piece. None of them, were like world beaters, but for most QBs when they come into the league, right, they don't go into a Brock Purdy situation where you're plugged into a great offense, or a Patrick Mahomes situation where you join a perennial playoff team and you've got Andy Reid, who's been in situ for years. You go to bad teams and you're in bad situations and you don't have good wide receivers. It takes you time to find it. Peyton Manning broke the rookie record both for touchdowns and interceptions in his debut season. So you want to see flashes. That's all you can really ask for from the rookies, but we need to see more from Bryce Young. But it is tough as the number 1 overall pick, especially when the team went up to get you, and in order to do so, they had to give away some of the weapons that are so important to a young QB.
I'm sure Bryce Young will tell you, Colin, that Josh Allen threw 3 interceptions to the same guy over the weekend, and he's one of the best players in the league. That earned Jordan Whitehead a $250,000 bonus, by the way. He had a performance-related target of 3 interceptions for the season. He managed to lock that up in just one game against the Bills. Of the rookie QBs, Brian, any standout performances for you?
I would side with Richardson. I think the Colts you can see the kind of electricity in which he can bring to the team, both running and throwing. Obviously, the touchdown to Bateman was probably more so Pittman's touchdown was probably more so of the skill of the wide receiver. But the Colts just looked a little bit more comfortable, throughout the course of the game. And 31-21 doesn't really, for me, do a true reflection of how well the Colts played over the course of the game. And I thought offensively they looked like they're on a better path. Couldn't see where Columns come from on the CJ Stroud. I always felt that was the most difficult one. Bearing in mind you're going into Baltimore, the Ravens kind of remind me of the Ravens of old, when they look like they're going to put a beat down on a team at home, they leave this team hanging around. And I wasn't overly impressed, but I thought CJ Stroud played with himself. I agree with Colin. Bryce Young, he for me is the one that I felt struggled the most. But no, Anthony Richardson for me, and Anthony Richardson, as Collins alludes, has to learn very quickly. He's not playing against accountants and various different people in the college game anymore. This is the real deal now. You can't be going in for those type of plays. He's going to find himself getting injured very quickly. But I think the Colts are onto something there. I think that we're going to see Colts winning more games maybe than we initially thought. And I think they're very much going to be in a lot of games. And this weekend is going to be interesting because let's not forget 2 rookies are going to play up against each other. Texans are playing the Colts this weekend. We'll see CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson go. One of them is going to get a win this weekend.
Of the non-quarterback rookies, Colin, Bijan Robinson certainly a standout. No surprises there. Looks like we got exactly what was advertised. He looks awesome.
Yeah, he does. And I know, Connor, that I had been kind of talking him up in some of those preseason games, and you were like, God, everyone's getting very excited about Bijan. But that burst of speed that he has, and his vision, because sometimes players can come into the league and they have one or the other. They have the vision, but they lack the real speed to take advantage of it, or they have the speed and they don't have the vision. Bijan he's as advertised, and he's going to be absolutely key to the Falcons if they are to win the division. I thought he was really impressive, and as well in terms of, Brian is right in terms of the Ravens left them hanging around, but Zay Flowers was really for his first game. I thought he showed out, and he showed he could be a weapon on the ground. He can obviously be a weapon as a wide receiver, yards after catch. He is very, very talented and very good hands.
Brian, on the defensive side of the ball, Christian Gonzalez looked like one of the standouts. Drafted number 17 overall by the Patriots. They don't tend to go for a cornerback unless they think they've got something pretty special that high in the draft. And he had a very nice sack on Jalen Hurts, a couple of great pass breakups, played every snap against one of the toughest offenses to play against in the league, and very much looked at home and helped keep the Patriots in contention there. They kept hanging around for the whole game there.
Yeah, when we did our live show in Busters on the Ball there with Phoebe Schechter, and we were discussing potential defensive players of the year, he was the one I went with, because he might have went to 18 in the draft, but he went to 18 because of various different other teams recording. Like, we saw a run on offensive line, because he should have went a lot earlier. And I thought the Patriots, got a steal there. Yeah, the sack was impressive, but you're right. Like, you got up against AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. They flipped them from one to the other throughout the course of the game. Some really good, strong breakups. Looks like a player, and looks like a player. Like, we know what's going to happen here. Belichick is going to turn this guy into a real pro. Whether he's someone that will benefit from him 3 or 4 years down the line when the Patriots do what they always do and not pay the guy. But looks like a standout player. Yeah, the sack was impressive, and more so the timing of the sack, where it was in the game at that stage, because they got back into the game. It looked like the Eagles were trying to put the game away. A nice measured, run on the quarterback, takes him down. I think there's big things to come from him this season, and maybe there's big things to come from this Patriots defense, because they held their own on Sunday, and on another day they would have got that. They would have got a victory against arguably one of the best teams in the league.
Colm, you got to like what Belichick does there with Gonzalez. Like, put you on an island against two of the best receivers in the league and show us what you can do, son. Like, a lot of faith placed in him, and he delivered.
Yeah, and look, the defense is always going to be the Patriots' strong point, and certainly they made life very, very difficult for the Eagles. And we knew the talent that he has, and if you have the talent and you have the nuance, then Bill Belichick is gonna turn you into a magnificent player. The question, I suppose, is going to be, can they build on, like we saw moments from their offense? And look, if the catch is in bounds, that could end up being a very different result. But sliding doors moment, ultimately that isn't what happened. I will say, just on rookie defensive players, Carter looks the business, and I imagine there might be some teams that are kind of going, maybe should have if we could redo the draft. I wonder would we go that direction instead?
You mean like the Bears? Let's call it what it is. Who traded out of that pick and let the Eagles have him?
Seahawks as well, I think, maybe.
Yeah, we shall see. Patriots, of course, ultimately ended up losing that game. They'll be looking to bounce back on Monday Night Football against the Dolphins. That's a matchup of strength versus strength there. That Patriots defense against the Dolphins offense, which, as we've already discussed, was absolutely explosive in Week 1, with Tua putting up 466 yards. Can't wait to see the scheme that Belichick and that Patriots defense deploy to try and take some of the air out of those tires. But let's look at who else might be looking to bounce back in Week 2. Probably Bengals at the head of the list. Brian, really fell flat for them. My Super Bowl pick. That wasn't the only one. And it didn't get off to the greatest of starts in Week 1, albeit that, we talked about it. It's a divisional game. The Browns do tend to own that rivalry. They bloodied the Bengals' noses a number of times over the last couple of seasons, regardless of how well they've been going. But Joe Burrow in particular looked very, very flat, and looked like he could have done with having a little bit more reps in preseason and not having picked up that calf injury, which really does seem to have hampered his preparation for the opener.
Yeah, I probably sound like a broken down record at this stage, but like, this game had two storylines for me, and one of which was we're going to see a Browns defense which is going to come and play very strong at the start of the season under a new defense coordinator in Jim Schwartz, and that I didn't think the Bengals would be ready because of the Burrow situation. Spoke about it last Thursday in our live show in Crow Park, our Week 1 preview, that I felt there was no off season for him. There was no proper training camp for him in the lead up to the game, and it's a divisional game, and they've had their number. But what was striking for me was the inconsistency of the offense throughout the course of the game. You would expect was the Browns defense to be really strong. At some stage, the Bengals would get something going. Throughout the course of the game, all the drives, they had no more than 7 You had no more than 7 plays on each drive. Like that's how dominant they were. And within those 7 plays, there was only two first downs and 1 drive throughout the course of the game. He had 82 yards throwing. Joe Burrow didn't even get over 100. Like that for me just shows how dominant the game was, and worked out perfectly for the Browns because they didn't have to do anything, on offense. There was a play, there was a particular point in the third quarter where I think they had a 4th and 4 at the 39 of the Bengals, and they punted. And previous years, Stefanski would have been gone for that. Maybe he's learned from his mistakes. Maybe Brandon Staley should listen, take a point on what he did there. But previous games it would have been a long field goal. But no, let's just punt it. Let's back them up, and let's allow the Bengals to go and beat this defense, which they knew they couldn't do on Sunday. So good strategic play coming from the head coach of the Browns. But Browns impressed me on Sunday. Bengals will get it right, and they probably get it right on Sunday against the Ravens. 2 AFC North clashes this weekend. Sunday with the Bengals, Ravens, and obviously Steelers, Browns Monday. 2 enticing games.
Colin, if any team wants to bounce back, it's the Giants after getting pasted and shut out, as we talked about, 40-0 against the Cowboys. Micah Parsons dancing all over them. But if you're looking for a bounce back and you want a rebound relationship into your loving embrace, comes the Cardinals on Sunday. That's not the worst way to try and get your season back on track. Do you think they'll do it?
Well, the Cards were feistier than expected against the Commanders, and I mean, I suppose it'll be interesting to see, how much of, because I think they was a 6 sacks that they ultimately ended up with. How much of that was on the Commanders' O-line? Now, the Giants' O-line had its issues. The Cardinals are not the Dallas Cowboys, but it's a big test of them to get right back up, and they need to, right? Because if they were to, it needs to be more than just a win, I feel, right? Because when you lose to a divisional rival in that manner, right? And again, you had all the chirping from the outside. People like me who were saying Daniel Jones isn't worth the contract. Don't pay him that sort of money. You need a statement performance. You need to shut people up. And the Giants need to do that. Get it back on track. Just say, look, it was a one-off against the Cowboys and we can move on. But, surely you would imagine that it can't be worse. But then we come from a little island that produced a poet called Gerard Manley Hopkins, who wrote a poem, "No worst there is none." And that be careful in thinking that you've hit rock bottom, because you haven't necessarily always have, but you would expect the Giants to take care of business in that.
Yeah, well, one person who's hoping that he has hit rock bottom and it's only going to get better is Kadarius Toney, Brian, who had a shocker of a performance for the Chiefs. Looked like he was allergic to the ball. There's a great still of the pick six that Mahomes, I was going to say Mahomes threw, but how grossly unfair that is. Like, the ball is literally right in Kadarius Toney's hands. It couldn't have been better thrown. The Chiefs receivers looked like they didn't practice catching the ball at all during the offseason. It's hard to see something like that being repeated, and you would think they're likely to bounce back in week 2.
That probably was the best moment of the weekend for Giants fans after what we saw Sunday. Was Friday lunchtime, was the amount of Kadarius Toney memes going around from Thursday night's game. I mean, the guy couldn't get out of his own way on Thursday night, and we haven't really had a chance to speak about this game in real detail. Like, Mahomes couldn't do any more than what he did on Thursday night. It was clear and evident that there's a huge drop off when Kelsey's not in the team, and not so much around the players and their abilities, more so how they scheme against other teams and teams having to factor in Kelsey on the field. There was none of that on Thursday. The Lions played a great game, and obviously Dan Campbell has this team really fired up and ready to go. But Kadarius Toney dropped the ball. There was one moment in the game where he dropped the ball as Richie James came across him. Richie James was the guy who took over the snaps from him at the Giants. Like, they couldn't get out of each other's way last year, the Giants, and they couldn't seem to get out of each other's way on the field on Thursday night. In terms of the game on the weekend, this probably is for me the game of the weekend. I mean, we got the Jags who will want to put a marker down to say that they're really in the mix now for the AFC. They've come off a really, I wouldn't say a convincing win, but a really strong performance offensively. We saw the Zay Jones touchdown with Trevor Lawrence quite efficient throughout the course of the game for large parts. And they'll fancy themselves at home against the Chiefs. But Andy Reid having 10 days to prepare, coming off a loss, and we'd be interested to see if Kelsey just come back this weekend, if Kelsey's back. with 10 days to prepare, you would expect the Chiefs to rebound, but it's not going to be a gimme. No, far from it.
I have to say, to your point, Brian, not that I would wish it on the guy, but there's something compelling about watching Patrick Mahomes in a losing effort. I mean, it's so fascinating to see how he just does everything he can to bend the game to his will. And it must have been incredibly frustrating for him. I'm sure he was biting his lip going into that locker room, because on another day, he would have masterminded that victory, regardless of how well the Lions played and regardless of Kelsey's absence, because he just has options on the joypad that other players don't have. He just can figure out something out of nothing every single snap. Like even harken back to that game against the Bucks in the Super Bowl, where he tried that impossible kind of falling towards the ground, flicking the ball upwards towards the end zone throw that almost came off. Like it is thrilling to watch. Like it's one thing when they're going well and when everything's falling into place. It's another thing to see just how hard he works and the depths of his imagination when he just opens up everything that's available to him in the sandbox, which he pretty much did, unfortunately to no avail, thanks to the incompetence of Kadarius Toney and some of the other receivers on the field. But again, looking to other bounce back games, Colin, and to teams that we would have question marks around. Steelers in week 2 up against the Browns. That is no gimme, given what we saw from them in their season opener. It's looking like a tough enough schedule for the Steelers now, and not necessarily the game you wanted to see rolling around when you've taken a big L at week 1.
No, but I suppose to me, look, this is all about the Matt Canada, and if I'm to keep on the poetry theme, if you go to the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, which some of our people watching may have remember from Soundings and from the Leaving Cert, and there's a line in that, I remember, indeed, there will be a time to ask the question, do I dare and do I dare? Well, do you dare, Matt Canada? Are you willing to break the shackles of the game plan that you seem to have? It's like he's playing Madden, and there's like he keeps spamming the same play over and over again, or the same 3 plays, but like they don't work, and he seems like immune to this what is playing out in the field in front of him, and that they ultimately decided to keep him, and now they have to live with the consequences. We didn't really get into the worry on the Steelers is the injuries, right? Because Deontay Johnson is out for weeks. Cam Hayward is out for months. I mean, in terms of who you could afford to lose, Cam Hayward is pretty high up that list. Like TJ Watt is obviously at the top, but Cam Hayward must be in and around that. So it's, they have a great coach. They have a great setup, but it's everybody. This is a league that does everything it can to ensure parity. So everyone's always, playing catch up with each other, and they're in an interesting division in terms of that AFC North, because they all face off against each other, obviously this weekend, and so is somebody going to be finding themselves 0-2 and trying to dig yourself out of that in a really, really tough division, because the Browns, that defense. I mean, I didn't get to like the clip of you called out earlier, Connor, about Geno saying, "Oh my God," with Aaron Donald rushing at him. But that clip of Myles Garrett playing mind games with the
practicing his crossover before he executes.
I mean, he's just having a laugh as he's moving, and you see the guard kind of look at the center and kind of go, "Good luck, buddy." That was kind of tells you about like this division. So the Steelers they're going to be in a dogfight, but they are best when their back is up against the wall.
Yeah, just a pro tip: don't call them elves. Didn't work out for Jamar Chase. That's not a tactic you want to deploy for the rest of the season. The rest of the NFL is very much on notice about that. Okay, that's the bounce backs, Brian, of the teams that perhaps would have been expecting to go in 1-0, but now maybe faced a very real prospect of being 0-2 after week 2. Possibly the Vikings, top of that list, dropped the season opener against the Bucks unexpectedly, and they've got the Eagles next up. Doesn't get any easier.
Yeah, it's a worrying time for Vikings. For me, they would be the biggest letdown of last season. Last weekend. I think no, not last season, but no, like they would, like everybody would have felt they would have won that game. Sometimes we write off teams by what they've done in the off season, but what we don't see on the outside looking in is kind of what this team can do in terms of rallying around each other. And it was very evident that the Bucs are rallying around Baker Mayfield and various different people are rallying around the head coach. But just on the Vikings, I mean, in the first half, Kirk Cousins had some silly plays, interceptions, fumbles, never got it going throughout the course of the game. It always felt like they were chasing, even when they got back to 70 and all, it just didn't feel right. It always felt like they just weren't the Vikings which we saw last year. It was very disappointing to see a team that we all felt would be really challenging, not necessarily to win the division this year. I know some people have gone against them, but like we still felt that we would see a reaction from them. We thought we'd see a more dominant defense with Brian Flores coming in. And even at the end, when it was 2017 and the Bucs were given the ball back for a period of time, you still like the Vikings, and that's with Brian Flores there, you think would find a way to stop them. They didn't. They allowed them to essentially run the clock down and get that first down on the throw to the perimeter, getting the first down, closing out the game, killing the clock. Just nothing seemed to go right for them. The only bright spot for me actually would be Jordan Addison, who had his first touchdown, the rookie wide receiver. I think we'll see a lot more of that this season because teams will focus so much on Justin Jefferson, who still had 154 yards in a game, which, they were disappointing in offense. He still finds a way to come up with huge numbers. Just it didn't go right. And then he go in on Thursday night against an Eagles team that blew them out. I think it was week 2 last year, except it was Monday Night Football. They got blown out. It'd be interesting to see can they live with this Eagles team on Sunday, who, let's be fair, didn't play brilliantly offensively in week 1. So they'll be looking to get off to a fast start in their home opener.
Colin, we talked about the Seahawks already and how they would well have expected, and we would have expected them to go into week 2 with the win under the belt. Didn't work out that way against the Rams. They've got the Lions, and judging by the way the Lions started the season, they're not giving anything away.
Yeah, just a very quick and speculative point on the Vikings. If they were to lose, and the Jets were to lose, and the Jets were to make a package offer for Kirk Cousins, could you tempt the Vikings? Now, given that his contract is guaranteed, right, it would be a huge hit, but it would mean the Vikings, he is out of contract at the end of the season. So depending on what you offered them, it might be worth their while. Connor, for the Seahawks, they've brought in Jason Peters to try to solidify things, but they are going up against a buoyant Lions team. I saw Jamar Gibbs touched the ball 9 times and he broke 8 tackles in those nine touches. I wonder if we will see more of him this coming weekend. But the Lions, they should be a lot of fun. It's a tough schedule. But if the Lions were to be sitting 2-0 at the end of that stretch, you'd have to say they are nicely poised.
And they just look so well coached up as well. Sorry, Brian, but just one of the things that was a real standout for me was the performance of that Lions O-line. I mean, they just let Jared Goff go to work. Ben Johnson has them scheming really nicely. He's got if there's one offensive coordinator who looks like he's getting the absolute max at what's available to him, it really to me looks like Johnson. I'm a big fan. There's no way they hold on to him at the end of the season. He has to go to a head coaching job, you got to feel.
No, sorry, I was just going to say we've moved our Monday slot to Tuesdays, and it's been very beneficial to Colin because he's not only is he giving us wisdom of poetry this evening, he's even coming up with trades, early on in the season. It's fantastic stuff.
Any more trades you want to call out before we wrap, Colin?
I'll wait. That's I've given two poems and a trade. Let's see what Thursday night brings.
Let's just hope we're not, as to quote Thomas Clark, riveted by a dark exhausted eye, a dry downturning mouth as we watch the late games. We'll hope to be bright and breezy as we do our picks ahead of week 2 on Thursday. We'll see you then.